Hi, welcome to another episode of History in 7 Facts. In this show we'll explore some of the most interesting things that we know or not know about our own past. In this current chapter we're going to discover some of the lost ancient worlds to see if we can find something interesting you may not know. Today I want to talk about an ancient monument that baffles visitors and scientists alike, Stonehenge. How did these megalithic stones manage to survive intact out in the open for so many thousands of years? When thinking of Stonehenge, we imagine the strangely aligned huge stones, and we automatically assume that they look the same way they did when they were first built. In reality though, this ancient monument has been disturbed, vandalized, rearranged and restored several times. In the 20th century alone, there were 3 major restorations. The fallen blocks were raised, those that were about to fall were restored, and countless blocks have been rooted into concrete. Some of the massive beams were placed on top with cranes and not by the ancients, as we all assume. When examining the actual evolution of the site, one might draw a simple conclusion. Stonehenge is not really an ancient monument, but rather a modern recreation. Most of the large 162 stones have changed places several times, mostly in the 20th century, so the Stonehenge we see today is definitely not the one our ancestors built. In truth, there's no one that can definitely say how Stonehenge should look, since we have no blueprints or written records about it. Furthermore, it seems that the site was in a constant evolution even in ancient times when it was first built. The first construction was a circular earth bank built some 5,000 years ago. The actual stones were added to the site around 2400 BC, but their configuration was changed several times by the ancients themselves. The last usage of Stonehenge was around the year 1600 BC, and since then it went through several acts of vandalism, in addition to the expected degradation. At least 60 smaller blocks have been stolen from Stonehenge and probably used for construction, both in the Middle Ages and in modern times. The 17th century historian John Aubrey spent most of his life studying the monument. It was he who uncovered that blocks from Stonehenge were being used by the locals to build houses and even a bridge, and they would also grind the stones into dust and use them in wells to keep away toads. The rest of the blocks were severely degraded. There are several accounts of trilithons, the door-shaped structures, fallen over due to high winds or the frost. But the most significant degrading of the monument didn't occur due to weather or even the locals. It was because of tourists. The researchers of the 18th century were deploring the behavior of the visitors, who were actually breaking the stones with hammers to take pieces home as souvenirs. Others were carving their names into the stones, like a certain H. Bridger in 1866. But the destruction wasn't only confined to the Victorian era. During World War I, a military camp in the area practically erased the 3-kilometer-long eastern ditch that used to surround Stonehenge, and in the same period officials even considered demolishing the site altogether because it could have been used as a landmark. Eventually, the destruction stopped. But the restoration projects also brought a lot of changes to the monument. In 1898, Sir Edmund Antrobus inherited the land on which Stonehenge is, and his immediate thought was to just sell the entire thing. He also considered sending the monument piece by piece to America if someone was willing to pay enough. In the end though, he decided to hire Professor William Gowland, who was charged with the first restoration project of Stonehenge in the modern era. Under the professor's guidance, one block was straightened and others were propped up using logs. Simultaneously, archaeological digs were opened around the site. After World War I, the second big restoring of Stonehenge was initiated. Beams that have stood unmoved for thousands of years have been lifted and brought into a vertical position. Concrete was poured at the base of these stones, and once the concrete was cured, the beams were put on top. The restoration went on for years, and at the end, most of the vertical blocks were fixed in the ground with concrete. Only 7 of the stones were still left in their initial positions. 1963 was the last time a major intervention took place at Stonehenge after Stone 23 fell over. Since then, Stonehenge remained largely untouched. In this area of Britain, Stonehenge isn't the only megalithic structure. Just 24 kilometers to the north, there's another prehistoric construction, the Avebury circles. This site contains the largest megalithic stone circle in the world. This mysterious assembly of earth banks, ditches and large pieces of stone has been abandoned since the Iron Age. When visiting, you automatically assume that the site has remained untouched for thousands of years. But just like Stonehenge, Avebury, in its current form at least, is actually a much more recent creation. Alexander Kyler bought the village of Avebury together with the prehistoric stones in 1934, with the intention to rebuild the entire site the way he thought it once looked. At the time, only 4 of the large stones were still standing, while the others were buried, destroyed, or missing, probably used as construction material. The village was right in the middle of the main circle, so Kyler proceeded with the demolishing of houses, fences, and everything else. Then he unburied the stones and erected them, placing them where he thought they were supposed to be. Now, to be fair, Kyler was an archaeologist and the reconstruction was made pretty well. He even found a skeleton of a man under what is now called the Barber Stone. The poor man was killed some 700 years ago when the large stone fell on him. But the studying and rebuilding of such an ancient and important site surely requires more than the assumptions of just one scientist. Furthermore, in 2003, other stones were found buried even deeper, at 2.1 meters below ground, and at least 14 other 100-ton stones are still buried. This means that Avebury, just like Stonehenge, is still missing many pieces, and the monuments we see today probably look nothing like the original constructions. Now back to Stonehenge. This ancient monument was created by a culture that left no written records and that we know almost nothing about. Many aspects of Stonehenge, such as how it was built and which purposes it was used for, remain subject to debate. There is little or no direct evidence revealing the construction techniques used by the Stonehenge builders. Proposed functions for the site include usage as an astronomical observatory, a religious site, a burial site, or a combination of these 3. It could also have been a place for healing, which would explain the high number of burials and the evidence of trauma on many remains. The design also seems to include a celestial observatory function, which could have allowed predictions of eclipses, solstices, or equinoxes. So as you can see, the best we can do about Stonehenge is to make some educated guesses. So then it's maybe not so surprising that the only way we could restore it was by using our own contemporary imagination. Thank you for watching this episode of 7 Facts. I hope this was interesting and informative, and maybe it even inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked this video, please thumbs up and subscribe. While you're downstairs, let me know what you think about this video. Please consider visiting my Patreon page and become a patron. The link is in the description. I hope to see you next time. Bye.